So that was Joe Rogan saying he would quit his podcast if it got to the point where he felt like he couldn't discuss the things he wanted to discuss.
I become something different because it grew bigger, I'll quit. If it gets to a point where I can't do it anymore, where I have to do it in some sort of weird way, where I walk on eggshells and mind my P's and Q's, that.
No, I get you.
Follows from what he said previously and how he feels about some of the calls to have him taken down off Spotify. Calls that so far Spotify has totally defended him for the most part, has pushed back on, and it's gotten a little quieter, I guess, over the last few weeks. We're no longer doing a Rogan segment every day.
We don't do a daily segment anymore.
I know it.
Yeah, and he's talked a bunch in the past about how the podcast evolves. It just started with him talking to friends, basically, and then eventually it just started getting a little bit bigger. And when it got bigger, then people would reach out and say, "Hey, this so and so interesting person wants to come on. Do you want to talk to them?" I said, "Sure, that sounds interesting." So we'd do a 3-hour conversation with them. That would get bigger, and that would get bigger, and so it wasn't as if it was kind of reverse engineered from an idea of this program, and then they built it from scratch. So therefore, it's like nobody really wants Joe Rogan walking on eggshells.
No, of course not.
Like you're not going to get the NPR, MSNBC crowd to start listening just because now he's caveating and being more careful about what he says, and his actual audience would leave. So he wouldn't have to necessarily quit. The audience would quit him.
Nobody wants anybody walking on eggshells. They want to hear what you actually think. I mean, that's what our audience hears from us. Some minor, some things we would discuss that you two can't let us. But other than that, otherwise, you get our totally unvarnished opinion. Yeah, and I'm curious about this from your perspective too. This is a little bit harder for me because I came up in print journalism, and still print journalism is where I considered my home to be. And when you're doing that type of work, you write out your draft, you get it edited. You often, if it's sensitive, you get it fact checked, and you don't publish it until you know that every fact is exactly right. And I hate getting facts wrong. Like yesterday, I was saying that. When we were talking about the, what story was it? Oh, the judge who was saying that Trump may or may not have committed a crime. I said that was a D.C. judge. That's a California judge. Mm-hmm. A separate D.C. judge had made a similar argument, but the article we were talking about was this is a California judge who had made it around a due process argument and saying that his pressuring Mike Pence could have been a crime. But I conflated a bunch of different stories, and it kills me when I do that because accuracy is everything when you're in journalism. And it's different. I mean, like you, I've made now this transition from mostly just writing, and what you write gets edited, it gets revised, it's in consultation with someone, to just speaking for like hours a day, just telling you what I think, which is a much less. It's not edited at all, or I guess there's some editing. Some help, producers help us put together segments, give us ideas for things we should talk about. They know what we think generally, so they're like, oh yeah, this is good for you. But it is different because it's more just off the cuff, and the danger of saying something wrong. I mean, if you talk and I'm sure that's danger Rogan faces, talking for 3 hours. If you let me talk for 3 hours straight, I'm sure I'm eventually going to say something wrong, or slip up or something. I mean, that's why I keep my laptop open while we do this, and if you say something that I think I don't agree with, or that but I'm not sure, I look it up, or Kim or something, or then we can fact check myself later. So it's an interesting process. It is very different from writing. It's sort of like if your Google Doc that you were writing in was live in public, and people are just following it along. Luckily. Now the difference with Rogan, is it's not live. Or it's not live. So he wouldn't have to walk on any eggshells, and if something was just flagrantly wrong, which happens in podcasts all the time. If something's flagrantly wrong, you can go in and be like, you know what, that's actually wrong. So we know it's wrong. It's not in dispute that it's wrong. Just snip that out, so we don't share it. But he doesn't do that. That could be a compromise that he could reach. Like, oh, I said 2 + 2 is 7. You're right. If you make those kinds of mistakes, I did a podcast not for Rising, but for something else the other week, and I said EU when I meant to say UK, and then just when we were done, they're like, oh, by the way, you said And so we filmed we did the line over again because it was just I meant to say one.
Right, which is now if it's a difference of opinion, then
not to do that.
Don't take that out. But if it's just a factual difference,
but what they're going after Rogan for, though, is not that kind of thing, right? It's what he gets criticism for is actually opinions, not easy things you could do over, but a philosophy of skepticism, mostly of COVID stuff, of just departing substantially from what the health policymakers have said, in a way that we have also departed to some extent with. I mean, we have different opinions, and Kim has different opinions, but I share many of his criticisms of the mandates and the non-vaccine mitigation efforts. I don't necessarily agree with him on all his ideas about what therapeutics work, but I do agree with him on the mandates, and that is an opinion that a lot of people in the establishment, in the government establishment, their allies in the media, the public health establishment, just doesn't want those views having as big an audience as they had, and they have a massive audience in the person of Joe Rogan.
Right, and it's been interesting to watch the media try to fact check some things that can't really be fact checked. Even things that I wildly disagree with, like say he had, was it Malone on, who was talking about mass psychosis formation?
Right.
To me, an utterly absurd concept that is not rooted in any social science that more accurately could possibly explain him and his followers than the rest of the world. But it's just an opinion, really. It's his take. Mm-hmm. It's his scanning of the world and drawing from, I guess, some Norwegian author and saying that this is the way that I define what's happening in our world now. I think he's wrong. I think it makes no sense. But it's not really something where you can point to a fact and say, factually.
Well, that's the entire problem with social science. Yeah, I agree with you that whole thing was half-baked, but all social science is half-baked.
Right. Is Marxism half-baked?
Marxism, yes.
Is
Marxism is very half-baked.
But at the same time, it has extraordinary analytical power to it in explaining, contradictions and different phenomena that we observe in the real world. Mm-hmm. But some people would say, these elements of it are completely half-baked. So you can't really fact-check it.
Right. And you can't falsify it. You can't. And when you try, so many social science kind of studies, the replication crisis really changed my thinking about this. Right. But you have these studies that say, the people work like this, and we studied it, and we used very imperfect metrics. We actually used mice in labs or something, and then they try to do it again, and they can't reproduce the results. So it's no better than random.
And then you're left with the Marxists saying, well, real communism's never been tried, and the capitalists saying, well, the real free market has never existed because we've always had these governments interfering. Yeah. And if you could just do that, then my theory would be right.
What really threw me with Marxism was learning that really the theory is that the world, according to Karl Marx himself, is the world is going to sort of spontaneously organize itself into this communist utopia sometime in the near future. In the comet is about, we're about to be raptured. It was verging on that kind of stuff, and it doesn't happen.
And in his defense, that was the least hashed out part of his own theory, and that's what a lot of kind of post-Marxists have focused their work on, is figuring that out. And the thing that he didn't see, that Keynes saw, was the way that capitalism's contradictions created then mechanisms inside them that would keep things going rather than create a class war, such as, a minimum wage, social security, public spending, to benefit the public, and that absorbs then a lot of these contradictions that he talked about. And for whatever reason, he just didn't see those, and just saw the coming clash.
Right.
And also, Engels saw World War I coming, and that was the dividing line where he was saying the working classes will never go to war with each other. Oh no! Turns out,
they
absolutely will.
They absolutely
Everything
will.
was reshaped differently after that.
Yeah. We should note that Spotify is rolling out a COVID content advisory tab on podcasts and other content that mentions the coronavirus. Spotify promised the feature a small blue tab that directs to its COVID-19 information hub nearly 2 months ago. It comes after a handful of musicians and creators boycotted the platform for its airing of the Joe Rogan Experience, which they say spread COVID-19 vaccine misinformation. So I don't know if this system, if it's just a little label system that COVID is being discussed at all.
And Rogan said at the time he was supportive of that.
Yeah, it's fine, but also stupid.
Maybe if you got millions of people and some of them want to click on that, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I guess. It's but how does that? It's just not. You're not changing anybody's mind. Like no one's going. Oh, I'm about to uncover. Spotify thinks there might be something suspect about that. Like. What is that doing?
Yeah, it's not
I don't know
clear.
what it's doing, and I wonder, I prefer, and I wonder exactly how. I prefer the fact checks that are done by. I've said this on the show before that I like Twitter's system the best, the Birdwatch system, which it hasn't formally rolled out to everything, but that just allows anyone can post a sort of a content advisory note on any tweet, and it's under it, and it says, oh, there's a note on this, and anyone can do it. And you can add here's why I think this is wrong, and here's a link, and then somebody can do that to that comment, and you can vote. Was this useful? Was this helpful? Was this comment? And it's a crowdsourced sort of fact checking, closer to what Wikipedia does.
Right.
Which, and I know I've been knocked for saying that Wikipedia is generally reliable.
Pretty good.
It is more reliable than this system is better. This system of user-generated fact checking. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It is better than having no fact checking whatsoever, and also better than having a handful of ideological activists doing the fact checking, which is what Facebook has. Facebook has invested a handful of totally far left, the most far left ideologues ever,
too,
and also that it has some variety. It also has the Daily Caller, and they have sole power and they can just say no, this thing is wrong, and their fact checking has been wildly irresponsible.
I remember they took down a Think Progress, may it rest in peace, a post that was an analysis of a Supreme Court decision, because I think it was the Daily Caller at that point, but somebody or one of the conservative publications didn't agree with the analysis. It's this is just an analysis. It might be right, might be wrong. It's which opinion? It's an opinion,
right? And they follow no normal norms of journalism in this fact checking. The fact checking organizations are many of them are not operating under kind of journalistic considerations. I was falsely quoted by them. They said, you said this quote and this quote is false. But I didn't say that quote. That quote doesn't appear in the article. I've not made that claim, which is libelous. You can't accuse me of saying something I didn't say.
Did you sue them?
No, I didn't sue them. I just went to the manager and got Facebook.
I like the crowdsourcing response too, because then you can decide, then you can say, oh, okay, this person says X, but tens of thousands of people are saying that I should actually consider the opinion Y.
Right.
That is saying that this is wrong, then you can look at it yourself. I think Spotify should do something like that. Allow people to clip out, Malone or whoever. Let's say he's interviewing Malone. Say, here's what Malone said. Here's the fact, and it can live in a tree near Rogan, so that then people who are watching Rogan have a choice then to go and watch. And also probably the corporation probably benefits. You're keeping people in your little ecosystem.
Well, I think that's better than a rule that says, nope, Rogan's not allowed to have somebody like Malone. It's dangerous. You can't hear it. We don't trust you to listen to this.
Right, and if you incentivize people to actually go through and fact check, you probably get some interesting content out of that.
Yeah. Free idea for you, Spotify.
There you go. Take it and run with it.
We'll be back with more Rising right after this.